Okay, so the part of your notes that we left off on yesterday was the end of George Washington's administration. And as George Washington is leaving office, he is going to deliver something known as the farewell address. And in his farewell address, what we talked about yesterday is that one, he said that the president should only be able to serve 2 terms. He said that the United States should stay out of foreign affairs other than just their commercial interests, which we talked about was trade, and that there should not be political parties that develop in the United States because that would just create more issues within the government. And throughout history, all of these principles are going to be broken by U.S. presidents at some point or another. So as George Washington is leaving, obviously someone else is going to have to be elected. And so the first thing we're going to start with today is the election of 1796. So in your notes, you should see where it begins with the election of 1796. And this election is going to be between Adams and Jefferson. So John Adams and Thomas Jefferson are going to both run for president. John Adams is going to win by 3 votes, and Jefferson is going to come in second place. During this time period, presidents and vice presidents were not elected the same way that they are today. So they both were running for president. But instead of, Adams having a vice president that he was running with, Jefferson became the vice president because he got the second most votes. So, for example, today, when Barack Obama was elected, Joe Biden was automatically on his ticket. So if you elected Barack Obama to become president, Joe Biden would automatically be his vice president. That was not the case during this time period when Adams and Jefferson were running for president. Okay, so Adams is going to become the new president, and he is part of the Federalist Party. So on your notes, in that blank, you need to put Federalist Party. Jefferson is a Democratic Republican. Okay, and we already talked about those. Those used to be the anti-federalists, so they wanted a weaker central government, right? Okay, so again, Adams is going to become the president, so fill in that blank now. And Jefferson is going to become the vice president. Okay, so John Adams is officially the second president of the United States. So under his presidency, the first thing we're going to talk about, there's a lot of crises that develop under John Adams' presidency. The first one being the crisis with France. So if you think about what we've talked about previously, what's going on with France during this time period? France is at war with Great Britain, right? Because they're in the middle of the French Revolution. Okay, and the United States is divided on who to support, British or the French. And initially, the United States is going to say, we're not going to side with either of them, but we're going to trade with both. Okay, and that's stuff we've previously talked about. Okay, so the first issue that is with France is that the French are attacking U.S. ships because they are in the middle of a war. So in the middle of a war, if a ship is in a war zone, it's generally going to be attacked. It doesn't matter whose country it belongs to. And one of the reasons that they're doing this is because the French are angry over Jay's Treaty. And this is what we talked about the first day of notes for this unit, that Jay's Treaty is going to establish that relationship with Britain that the United States previously did not have because of the American Revolution. So the French do not want the United States to be friends with Great Britain because the French helped the United States during the Revolutionary War. Okay, so they want the U.S. to be friends with them, right? It's kind of like a we scratched your back, now you have to scratch our back kind of thing. The U.S. is going to send ambassadors. Okay, ambassadors are just people who are going to negotiate and kind of smooth out relationships with people. So the United States is going to send ambassadors over to France. And Adams is going to be in charge of this. When they get over there, France is going to demand that the U.S. give them certain things to be able to get what they want. The U.S. is not going to support this. They are going to leave without giving in to these bribes, but it will go public and it's going to make the French look bad. This whole affair becomes known as the XYZ affair. Okay, and XYZ is just a substitute for the actual men's names who were participating in this bribe, the French men. So the XYZ affair. Make sure you know that and have that in your notes. Okay, the next crisis under Adams' administration is the crisis of the Constitution. Okay, the Federalists are going to pass the Alien and Sedition Acts. So in your notes, you need to write this. The Federalists are going to pass the Alien and Sedition Acts. The Federalists were who? They're the people who want a strong central government. Okay, so the Alien and Sedition Acts, the alien portion of it is going to allow the president to deport foreigners, especially the French. So Adams was not a big fan of the French. And so by passing this, it is going to say that he can send French people out of our country despite their rights. So basically they have to leave if he asks them to leave. The sedition part is going to pass a law that says the American people cannot speak out against or write against the U.S. government. So basically, the people cannot say anything bad about the president, or they're going to get in trouble and go to jail. Obviously, especially the sedition part of it is going to violate the First Amendment. Okay, if you can remember back to civics, I know that was a long time ago, but the First Amendment, everybody should know, is the freedom of speech, press, assembly, religion, and petition. Okay, so all of those things were violated by this Alien and Sedition Act. And this is going to specifically target Democratic Republicans. So generally, the people speaking out against the government is the Democratic Republicans because Jefferson, who is the vice president, is a Democratic Republican, while the president, John Adams, is a Federalist. Okay, they're two different political parties. They're not going to get along, and they're not going to want to agree on the same policies. Okay, so a lot of times they were going to pass things that just got under the other person's skin. Okay, the next crisis is the crisis of the Union. So move down in your notes. Okay, the first thing you need to have is the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. The Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. Okay, the Virginia resolutions was passed by Madison. So James Madison, you need to write that beside Virginia resolution. And it was basically saying that the state could nullify or declare laws that the federal government passed as unconstitutional. Okay, and the Kentucky resolution was passed by Thomas Jefferson, so write that beside Kentucky resolution, and it said the same thing, that the state government could tell the federal government that their laws were unconstitutional. Now, if you think about today, would this fly in today's country? Could North Carolina tell Barack Obama that Obamacare was unconstitutional? No, absolutely not. State governments do not have the right to tell the federal government what they can and cannot do. That is not their role. However, this is going to be the principle that the Civil War is started on. So right before the Civil War, you're going to have separation between the North and the South, right? The South is going to say, especially South Carolina, that the federal government cannot tell them what to do. Okay, and this is going to be the principle that is used to justify the Civil War. So this is very important. Star this now. You need to make sure you have like 5 stars by this, because this is going to determine the next, 50 to 60 years in the U.S. government. Okay, and this idea is called nullification. So to declare something unconstitutional is to nullify it. Okay, so again, that's just showing you Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, who were associated with these resolutions. Okay, the next thing is going to be the election of 1800. So now all of these crises have developed under Adams' administration, and it's 1800, and it's time for another presidential election. So in this election, you're going to have Thomas Jefferson run for president and John Adams run for president. And their VPs are going to be Aaron Burr and C. Pinnicky. Okay, Jefferson and Burr are going to tie, so that's why he becomes the vice president. Once the House of Representatives votes, they choose Aaron Burr as the vice president and Jefferson as the actual president. Okay, the 12th Amendment is going to be added to the Constitution at this time period because of all the drama that's going on with presidency and vice presidency. The 12th Amendment is going to establish that if no presidential candidate gets the majority of the electoral votes, that the House of Representatives decides. So that's what happened in this election when Jefferson and Aaron tied. Then they voted on that Jefferson would become president. The next thing that the 12th Amendment said is that it established separate ballots for president and vice president. So they still weren't on the same ballot like we do it today. So today, like I said, the vice president automatically comes with the president. But during this time period, now they're saying with the 12th Amendment that you're going to specifically vote on who becomes vice president and who becomes president rather than just saying that the second most votes gets vice president. Okay, so the next thing under Jefferson's administration, or almost under Jefferson's administration, is the midnight judges. So John Adams has just been voted out of the presidency, but he has one more night left. And so he is going to pass the Judiciary Act of 1801, his last night in office. And this is going to create more federal judges. So the federal judges are the ones who get to decide if laws should or should not be present. Okay, Adams, on the last night of his presidency, after he has passed the Judiciary Act, is going to try to appoint as many Federalists to the courts as he possibly can, because he wants the people in charge of the government or the people in charge of the courts to be the same political party that he is. But he's about to leave office. So Jefferson is going to block these new judges. And one of these judges is going to sue. Okay, so Thomas Jefferson as president. He's going to believe in a weaker national government because he is a Democratic Republican, so that's part of their beliefs. He's going to believe in a strict interpretation of the Constitution, so you have to go exactly by what the Constitution says. And he's going to reduce the size of the military. And he's going to cut spending and cut tariffs and the excise tax because the Democratic Republicans supported farmers who did not like the excise tax. And they're still going to be facing foreign policy problems with Great Britain and France. And the Democratic Republicans generally sided with France. Okay, so the next thing is number 1. You're going to have Marbury versus Madison. Okay, this is a court case. So in your notes, you need to write Marbury versus Madison. This is going to establish judicial review, which says that the Supreme Court can declare laws unconstitutional. So the Supreme Court can look at a law. For example, if they wanted to, they could look at the Alien and Sedition Acts. If they didn't like what they said, they could justify it by citing the Constitution and saying, this is not in the Constitution. The government does not have the right to pass this law, and therefore that law would be no more. Okay, that's the last thing we're going to go over in our notes today.